Toya was an ordinary, underachieving loser in high school, trying his best to prepare for the national exams so he doesn't end up working at Mickey D's for the rest of his life. But while he's trying his best to stay focused and study, his classmates are busy goofing off and talking about a recent string of killings that have been happening in the city lately. Apparently, whenever a victim is killed, people have reported seeing petals in the area, so everyone is starting to think the petals might have something to do with the serial killer. But Toya couldn't care less about any of that. A few moments later, the homeroom teacher comes in and asks for the class's attention because he would like to introduce a new student to everyone. However, as he calls the new student in, she completely ignores the teacher and the rest of the class just so she can walk right up to Toya and introduce herself as Hido. Toya has no idea why this random girl is paying so much attention to him, but he knows better than to get himself involved with crazy main character stuff, and she looks like a textbook MC, so he gives her a half-assed response and turns back to his studying. The girl takes a seat next to Toya and doesn't say another word to him for the rest of the class. But after school is over for the day and Toya is on his way home, she comes looking for him and jumps onto the railing next to him. She then does a backflip even more unnecessary than the stuff Leon Kennedy does, and Toya is understandably confused because he still has no idea why this random transfer student is so interested in him. But before he can even finish that thought, Hido grabs his face and starts looking straight into his eyes. This freaks Toya out, so he pulls away from her and says he's got to go to cram school now before walking off. As he's leaving, Hido starts talking to someone named Neumann on her phone and tells them that she was right about the look in Toya's eyes. And that single sentence means Toya is officially wrapped up in the plot, so there's nothing he can do about it now. Meanwhile, in a dark alleyway somewhere in the city, a crazy man is attacking a woman with a butcher's knife, saying he's going to make a fine meal out of her. And this alleyway happens to be right around the corner from the cram school Toya goes to, so the plot is already not looking good for him. Toya is currently sitting on a bench outside his cram school, looking at his transcripts from his latest mock exam, and to be honest, it's not bad. He's got a 70% average, but that's nowhere near enough to get him anywhere in the Asian school system. He throws his transcripts away in frustration and just sits there, wishing that he had some kind of talent, literally anything, if it would mean he doesn't have to remain a useless bum for the rest of his life. But as much as he wants a talent, he knows they don't just fall from the sky, so he's not going to get anything by simply wishing for it. At the same time, back near that alley, 2 police officers have been called in to investigate because a few people reported hearing a woman's screams coming from that area. But so far, they haven't been able to find anything. Just then, they notice a man hunched over in the corner, and they assume he must just be really drunk, so one of the officers walks up to him to check if he's alright. But to the officer's horror, he soon realizes that this guy is eating the human remains of the woman from earlier, and he seems really proud of himself. The officer can immediately tell that this dude ain't right in the head, so he pulls his gun, fully prepared to pump him full of lead if he makes any sudden moves. A few moments later, Toya is walking home when he passes that very same alleyway, and the first thing he sees are the now decapitated bodies of those 2 officers, all while the crazy guy is standing there laughing his ass off. And sure enough, Toya has officially been roped into the plot. Just then, Hido shows up out of nowhere, and seeing the look on Toya's face, she asks him if he's feeling jealous right now. She says that when most people witness someone else's talent, they feel one of 3 emotions: awe, fear, or envy, and she assumes that someone like Toya, who has been so desperate to gain a talent, must be feeling pretty jealous right now. Toya is still having trouble wrapping his head around the whole situation and the fact that Hido somehow knew he was going to be here. But just then, the man notices both Toya and Hido seems to have a bit of a history with fish. He says it's all thanks to Hido that he was able to awaken his talent, and that he is truly grateful to her. But as proof of his twisted sense of gratitude, he says he's going to do her the honor of turning her into his next meal. He then lunges at both Hido and Toya, but even though he was looking right at them, Hido still manages to grab Toya and hide behind a pillar, all before Fish's knife even hits the floor. Apparently, that little maneuver was all thanks to Newman's computational predictions, but Newman reminds Hido that she needs to take care of this as soon as possible. So Hido hands her phone over to Toya and asks him what he would do if there was an item that could allow you to gain the talents of your past lives instantly. That sounds like a dream come true for someone like Toya, but there's a catch. The item is this blade, and in order to gain the talent, you need to roleplay as a depressed emo teenager, so that's not exactly ideal. As Fish finally locates the 2 of them, Hido suddenly slashes her own neck, activating her past life talent as a kunoichi. As she does this, Toya notices flower petals pouring off of her, but before he can even ask about it, Fish attacks her, so Hido is forced to defend herself with her swords. While the fight is happening, Neumann talks to Toya through the phone and explains to him that through the branch of reincarnation, one can retrieve talents from their past lives, and those who have achieved reincarnation are called returners. As returners, both Fish and Haito are capable of performing superhuman feats, which is already pretty obvious, but Toya still has no idea what's up with the petals, so Neumann continues her explanation. She says that the petals are proof that someone has retrieved a talent from their former life. Even the most outstanding geniuses still die eventually, and when that happens, they are given a brand new life. But through reincarnation, it is possible for them to access their past skills. But just because someone was talented in their past life doesn't mean they were a good person, which is how you end up with people like Fish. Both good and bad alike are capable of awakening their past life talent, but there's also a chance that you were a talentless bum in your last life, in which case, attempting reincarnation will just kill you. That basically means that if Toya tries to use that thing, there's a good chance he might actually die, so Neumann asks him if he is still just as desperate to awaken a talent. She assumes Toya would get scared and refuse, but it turns out that she severely underestimated how insane he can be. Meanwhile, Haito is still fighting Fish, and Fish says he's disappointed because for someone who's supposed to have the talent of a legendary swordsman, her skills have been very underwhelming. Haito takes offense to that statement, so she decides to bust out one of her ultimate moves, the 8-hued corpse slash. At first, it looks like Fish is prepared for it since he manages to block one of Haito's slashes, but he forgets about the other 7, so a moment later, he is chopped to pieces, and the only thing left of him are his petals, which then scatter into the wind. Once Haito confirms that Fish is down, she goes back to pick up her blade, but then she notices that Toya is gone. She asks Neumann where he went, so Neumann explains that he took one of the reincarnation blades and ran off. Haito looks relieved because she was worried that Toya wouldn't have the guts to do it, but this is the exact outcome she was hoping for, and over in Toya's room, we see him drenched in blood after slicing his own neck. As he passes out, he has a vague dream about a mysterious white-haired man, and the next time he opens his eyes, it's already morning, and Haito is sitting in his room with him. He asks her what she's doing here, but then he sees his hand covered in dried blood, and that's when Haito tells him that he has successfully become a returner. He did do a lot of moaning and groaning in his sleep, though, so she asks him what that was all about. A little while later, Haito and Toya are sitting on a park bench, and Toya explains that he used to have an older brother who was good at everything. Everyone swarmed around him because he was a prodigy with a bright future, while Toya was left neglected because he was painfully and completely average. Everything he did was compared to Sia's exceptional performance, and just because Toya didn't win a gold medal in a foot race at 6 years old, his father called him a disappointment. Ever since then, Toya has been desperate to live up to the standard that Seiya had set, but for all the talents that Seiya had, he basically rolled a nat 1 on his health stat, so he eventually got sick and died. Toya's parents blamed him for Seiya's death for some reason, and that ended with him getting kicked out of the house, so he has been trying to get back at them by gaining a talent of his own to prove them wrong. Haito now understands why Toya was so desperate to get a talent, but desperate is an understatement because Toya literally tried every skill out there, and he was never any good at them. Haito says she understands how Toya feels because in a way, she's just like him. Toya is a bit confused by that statement, so he's about to ask her what she means by that, but before he could do so, she suddenly receives a message from Neumann asking her to come over. A few minutes later, they arrive in Neumann's room, and just by looking at the place, you can tell that Neumann has never touched grass before, mostly because she can't walk. Toya recognizes her voice as the one from the phone yesterday, and Haito asks Neumann where everyone else is because it's awfully empty here. Neumann explains that all the others are currently out on missions to defeat evil returners. After all, that is their main mission, here at the Forest of Greats. She explains that since evil returners are bound to pop up every now and then, it is their duty to eliminate them as soon as possible before they cause harm to the public like Fish did yesterday, and she expects Toya to join the fight. Toya seems very cooperative for someone who has just been told that he needs to kill other people, and on his first official assignment, he will be accompanied by Haito to take down an evil returner named Vlad. However, Neumann says she doesn't want them to kill him right away. That part is a little confusing for Haito, since killing evil returners is her job, but Neumann says she wants to gather some information on Vlad's talent, so they just need to keep him busy for 10 minutes, and after that, they can kill him. She also mentions that the mission will be on hold until 2 days from now because they still need to test out Toya's returner ability. So later that night, Toya heads out looking for an opportunity to use the ability. At one point, as he is walking down the street, he spots a burglar who had just stolen a girl's bag, and she is currently chasing after the thief. So Toya decides this is the perfect opportunity. Ironically, Toya's talent is called Right Arm of the Thief, and as expected, it's a stealing talent. So as the burglar runs past him, Toya is able to reach into the girl's bag and grab all her stuff for her. The thief then runs away, completely oblivious to the fact that the bag is now empty, and as the girl reaches Toya, she begins yelling at him for not stopping the thief when he had the chance. But then Toya tells her that there's no need to worry because he got all her stuff out of the bag. The girl is thankful for his help at first, but then she remembers that it was a Birkin bag that was stolen, and the bag itself is worth way more than her stuff, so she continues chasing after the thief. Toya's ability has an effective range of 70 centimeters, which is a huge hindrance since it has no obvious combat capabilities to speak of. But if Toya somehow manages to get within range to activate his talent, he is able to break the laws of physics to steal anything he can get his hands on, regardless of physical obstructions. And its effectiveness isn't limited to just items either, because in that brief moment, Toya is also able to steal the blood out of the thief's veins, so he is currently collapsed on the floor. By all indications, this is a power that seems evil, but as long as Toya doesn't use it for bad purposes, then there's no problem. That said, that guy wasn't a returner, he was just a regular thief, so a death sentence for stealing a purse seems a little too extreme. 2 days later, it's time for the mission to eliminate Vlad, so Haito and Toya go out into the forest to fight him. Toya has to keep his distance, while Haito takes the lead since he doesn't have much combat experience. The initial goal here is just to keep Vlad busy for 10 minutes so Neumann can gather information on him, but his talent allows him to create countless sharp spikes from the ground, and that makes it difficult for Haito to stay safe while fighting him, so she eventually gets stabbed in the shoulder by Vlad. Haito is down for the count here, so even though the 10 minutes are almost up, Neumann gives up on trying to gather information on Vlad and tells Toya to get out of there before he gets killed as well. But Toya doesn't feel comfortable leaving Haito to die in a situation like this. Vlad is about to finish Haito off when all of a sudden, an arm reaches through his chest, which catches him off guard because there's supposed to be a stone wall behind him. It turns out that Toya used the stone wall as cover to reach into Vlad's body, and Vlad assumes he had intended to steal his heart, but because he's still unaccustomed to his ability, he misses the mark and ends up stealing nothing. Vlad mocks Toya for failing at such a clear opportunity for victory, and given the circumstances, there's no way that Vlad could lose to him now that he knows what his ability is, so Toya and Haito are pretty much doomed. However, just then, a dark aura fills the air, and a loud voice orders Vlad to withdraw immediately. Vlad tries to tell his boss that he was just about to finish off these brats, but his boss makes himself very clear that Vlad is to withdraw at once, so he reluctantly runs away, leaving Haito and Toya alive. Later on, Toya is standing alone by a bridge when all of a sudden, he is cornered by Vlad. Vlad demands that he return what he stole from him that day, and at first, Toya tries to play dumb and act like he has no idea what Vlad is talking about, but Vlad says he knows Toya must have stolen his talent. Back when Toya attacked Vlad, his target was Vlad's talent all along, and the fact that Vlad came here alone to try to get it back means that he must not have told anyone about it, which is perfect for Toya because he wants to keep his ability to steal talents a secret, and to ensure that it remains a secret, he activates his stolen ability and impales Vlad with his own spikes. Toya is no hero, and he has no interest in protecting humanity. All he cares about is gaining as many talents as possible, whether good or evil, so he can become the most talented person on the planet, and he's not going to let anyone get in his way. The next morning, Neumann calls to wake Haito up, and she's a little confused because from what she can see, it looks like Toya spent the whole night studying, and she didn't think he was the kind of person to continue putting in pointless effort even though he has already awakened a talent. Toya ignores Neumann's statement and asks her what's on the agenda for today. So Neumann informs him that he's going to hunt down an evil reincarnator, but before that, there's one stop she'd like him to make first. Neumann gives Toya directions to get to Haito's home because she's not answering her phone, and after walking in, Toya finds her half asleep and half dressed in the middle of her dojo. Neumann begins yelling at Haito for being so lazy, but Haito says she only slept in because she spent all night training her sword skills. Once again, Neumann can't understand why someone would bother training when the skills they already possess far surpass anything they could achieve through their own efforts. But be that as it may, Haito still enjoys practicing whenever she can. Anyway, today's target is a rogue clown named Hisoka who targets young children and lures them into the forest to become his victims. Before long, they enter the territory of the killer clown, and he attacks them on sight because he was expecting them to show up. Haito immediately activates her powers, and Hisoka assumes this will be easy, since all he needs to do is keep his distance and use his nen. But before he can do anything, Haito has already slashed his body in half, so the mission is already over. This is technically a success, but Newman is pissed that Haido took the clown out so easily when this was meant to be an opportunity to let Toya get some real combat experience. She apologizes for jumping in so quickly, but she just thought the clown looked like an easy target, so she couldn't help herself. However, it looks like Haido and Toya weren't the only ones who were after the clown because there was a whole strike team tailing him, and now that they've seen Haido take the clown down so easily, they decide to begin following her as well so they can figure out the secret of these petal spreaders. Later that night, Haito is hunting down another evil reincarnator, but all of a sudden, a bunch of apples drop in front of Gin, and a second later, he is forced to the ground by a tremendous force. Gin struggles a lot, but he eventually manages to slip out of the gravity field to continue running away, and the Newton reincarnator is really impressed that he managed to overcome that much gravity on his own. Since the guy is on the run again, it's up to the Einstein reincarnator to stop him, so she uses the theory of quantum mechanics to teleport right next to Gin, and then teleport his arm off his body. Once Einstein returns, Newton congratulates her on a job well done, but asks why she didn't just teleport the guy's head off to finish it quickly. However, she says killing targets is the soldier's job, so she didn't want to steal his thunder. Just then, Gin has a gun pressed against the back of his head and is ordered to surrender, but in that moment, he uses his other hand to grab a pair of scissors and slashes both of the soldier's eyes and neck. Gin is sure that should have been enough to kill the soldier, but a moment later, he gets shot in the chest because the soldier isn't an ordinary man, he's the undead soldier reincarnator, so he literally cannot die. And that's not all either. They also have Dr. Raisha, the replicator, and he has completely surrounded the alleyway with his clones, so there is nowhere for Gin to go, and a few moments later, Gin is executed. After the mission is complete, they all head back to base, where Newman congratulates them on a job well done. They hand over the branch they recovered from Gin, and then Nightingale comes over to ask if any of them got hurt in battle since she is the angel of healing. Funasaka could use a little recovery since he's still missing a few body parts, so Nightingale hugs him and starts licking his cheek to begin the healing process. She also whispers into his ear that she wishes he would take better care of his body because she hates seeing him get hurt, and she really seems to be enjoying her time with Funasaka, so the others just leave them alone. As for Toya, while the others were out on their mission, he was busy sorting through the tangled wires of Newman's setup, and Haito is surprised that he's willing to do chores like this even though he finally has the talent he was so desperate for. But Toya says he just happens to enjoy doing little tasks like this, and Newman is grateful for his help because she couldn't get anyone else to help her with it. Newton has heard a lot about Toya from Newman, so he's excited to finally meet him, and normally they would do a formal introduction, but everyone else is already doing their own thing, and Nightingale is still kissing Funasaka, so they'll have to put the intros on hold for now. Later that night, Toya and Haito are walking home together, but just then, Toya notices that the lights in his apartment are on, which is odd since he lives alone, so he and Haito head up with caution to figure out what's going on. Once they get inside, Toya finds an old friend of his, Itsuki, sitting in his room. Itsuki starts talking about how Toya looks exactly the same even though it has been ages since they last saw each other. And seeing that Itsuki is one of Toya's friends, Haito decides to introduce herself. Toya mentions that despite how he may look, Itsuki is actually exceptional when it comes to martial arts, so much so that he was hailed as a child prodigy right alongside Toya's brother. And he is currently the head of a special forces unit in the military. He's not a bad guy, but Toya thinks he's really annoying because he takes every chance he can get to brag about his achievements. After settling down, Toya asks Itsuki what he's doing here, so he explains that he heard that Toya had been skipping school a lot lately, so he was concerned that something might have happened to him. But it looks like he was worried for nothing because he assumes Toya has just been busy with his new girlfriend. He honestly didn't think Toya had it in him to bag such a pretty girlfriend, and even though Toya tries to explain that he's got it all wrong, Itsuki thinks he's just embarrassed, so he tells him there's no need to hide this kind of thing from him since they've known each other for so long. Hearing that gets Haito curious, so she asks just how long they've known each other, and Itsuki takes out a picture from several years ago to show her. The picture was of Itsuki, Toya, and Sia, and since the three of them spent so much time together back then, Itsuki views Toya as his own little brother now. He always thought Toya and Seiya made an adorable pair because Toya always did everything in his power to catch up to Seiya, and Seiya would often slow down a little so he wouldn't leave Toya behind. He wonders how Seiya would react if he were here to see that his younger brother got a girlfriend. Though now that he thinks about it, Seiya never really paid much attention to little details like that, not because he didn't want to, but rather because he never had the time to since he was so busy. It's what you would call the curse of the talented, but Toya probably wouldn't understand what he's talking about. Anyway, he doesn't want to take up any more of Toya's quality time with his girlfriend, so he says he's leaving now. But Toya can't stand the fact that Itsuki still thinks he's talentless, so he stops him and announces that he finally has a talent of his own. Toya then activates his powers, and rather than being shocked, Itsuki looks pissed because he already knew about the reincarnators and how they work, and he's disappointed to find out that Toya really is one of those losers who rely on power they didn't earn. Haido gets offended and yells at Itsuki to take that back while holding him at sword point, because she says he would never understand what people like her and Toya had to go through before getting these powers. However, Itsuki says that just sounds like excuses a useless loser would make. Hearing Itsuki call her useless sends Haito over the edge, so she attempts to slash him. But Itsuki's martial arts talents are no joke, so he easily evades her attack and knocks her feet out from under her before pinning her to the ground. He tells her she's lucky that she's Toya's girlfriend, because otherwise he wouldn't have taken it so easy on her after a stunt like that. And Toya can't even be upset about what happened because Haito did try to kill Itsuki just now. As Itsuki is leaving, Toya admits that using the reincarnator power was indeed a cheap shortcut, but he plans to use this power to gain talents of his own so he can one day surpass Seiya, and hearing that, Itsuki leaves without saying much. Outside, around the corner, a group of Special Forces units were lying in wait because the real reason for Itsuki's visit today was to confirm if Toya really was one of the reincarnators, but even though Toya had confirmed it, he still tells the unit to fall back because he doesn't want to hurt his friend. Dr. Yoshiki is disappointed to hear that Itsuki doesn't intend to capture those two because he was really hoping to get some new samples of the reincarnator petals, but Itsuki tells Yoshiki that he already has more than enough samples, so no one is allowed to engage here. Meanwhile, back in Toya's room, Haito is sulking in the corner because not only did she lose her cool, she also got absolutely manhandled even with her talent activated. Seeing Haito so depressed, Toya finally understands what she meant when she said she is really similar to him. She explains that before obtaining her talent, she was an ordinary useless girl. So useless, in fact, that she was abandoned at birth. She grew up in an orphanage, and kids who live in orphanages are pretty mean, so she was constantly bullied, especially since her hair was a different color. She cried herself to sleep every night, and the staff didn't care enough to do anything about it, so they all just pretended they didn't notice. However, one day, she was taken in by a kind man who took her to his dojo and promised to train her. Haito was happy to finally have a place to belong, but because the family was built on long-standing rules and traditions, there were many who were against the master taking her in, but he didn't care about their objections and took Haito in regardless. He gave her all the love and attention she could ever ask for, and Haito wanted to repay him by working hard to master the sword, but no matter how much she trained, she could never improve because she had no talent for the sword. She desperately wanted to gain talent so she could make her father proud, and that's when she heard a rumor that a branch of reincarnation could allow her to awaken a talent. She searched all over the place until she eventually found one and awakened the sword skills of Musashi. But in her excitement to show her father her talent, she went too far and nearly killed him. He managed to survive, but he was left crippled and unable to hold a sword ever again, so the dojo was shut down, and the family kicked her out for what she had done. She doesn't want to let things end this way, so she plans to make things right by becoming a full reincarnator and reopening the dojo for her father. But this is the first time Toya has heard of a full reincarnator, so he doesn't know what she's talking about. Meanwhile, Itsuki and Yoshiki are driving back to base, and Itsuki really wishes he could have skipped that reunion because he didn't mean to say all that stuff back there, but he really is disappointed that Toya ended up this way. And what makes it even worse is that all this is exactly what the prophecy they received talked about, so things will only go downhill from here. Back at Toya's house, he asks what a full reincarnator is supposed to be, and Newman chimes in to explain that everyone back at the Tree of Greats is a full reincarnator, except Toya and Haito. The main difference is that while Haito and Toya have a limit on how long they can use their abilities, the other full reincarnators have no cooldown at all and are always in their talented form. This state can be reached by using your talents more and more in battle until you simply don't return to normal, and despite how sketchy that sounds, that's exactly what Haito is aiming for, because the only way she'd be able to face her father again is if she were to go back as Musashi Miyamoto. Later that night, Toya calls Haito out to the school because he has something he wants to show her. First, he makes her turn her phone off so Newman won't be able to listen in, and once he's sure it's safe, he reveals that his talent allows him to steal the talents of others. Haito tells Toya she's impressed because his talent is really useful, but Toya asks her if she's sure she wants to be celebrating this, because in the pursuit of talent, he would no doubt target his friends if it was necessary. However, something like that doesn't bother Haito because she would do the exact same thing if she was in Toya's shoes. She's rooting for Toya to do the best he can, but she's also a little annoyed, so she pushes Toya against the wall and asks him why he hasn't tried to steal her talent yet. She knows the relationship wouldn't stop him from doing it if he wanted to, so it must mean that he thinks her talent isn't worth stealing, and she's totally right. She won't deny that her talent isn't great right now, but she swears that she is going to train it until Toya is forced to acknowledge that it is a great talent and try to steal it from her. Toya understands what she's trying to say, so he promises to amass a collection of talents worthy of rivaling her in the future, as the two of them have now formed a bond as rivals. Once Yoshiki and Itsuki make it back, they immediately confront the seer they captured because, as much as Itsuki hates to admit it, everything the seer prophesied came to pass, right down to Toya revealing his powers to Itsuki using one of those blades. Yoshiki has attempted to analyze the blade to see what it's made of, but so far, they haven't managed to come up with anything, which is why they plan to get the answers they want out of the seer, one way or another. The seer finds the threat of torture to be funny. While they may be a specialized black ops unit, especially Itsuki, who possesses talent on par with the greats of history, they are still no match for what's coming. After all, they are just humans bound by the laws of physics, unlike the reincarnators. He chose to let them capture him in the first place, so there's no way they could hold him against his will even if they wanted to, but he does agree to give them some information. First, he tells them that he's about to get up and walk out of this room completely unharmed, and second, that his king is going to bring back the calamities of old. As he says this, the chains binding his hands snap off, and all the soldiers immediately begin firing in an attempt to suppress him, but after the dust settles, he is still perfectly fine. Itsuki then lunges forward and slices the seer's arm clean off, mocking him for claiming he could make it out of here unharmed, but to his shock, the seer still has his arm attached to his body, as if nothing had happened, so he really was unharmed. The seer then casually walks away, but this time, Itsuki tells his men to leave him alone because it's clear that none of them will be able to stop him without casualties. The seer says that was a smart move because he pretty much saved the lives of his men, but before he leaves, Itsuki asks him to at least answer one question. He wants to know if, when the seer mentioned a king, he was referring to the leader of some kind of returner alliance. However, the seer tells him it's nothing like that. There are some returners who have formed some kind of alliance, like the Tree of Greats group, but in his case, he is simply a humble servant of the King of Returners. Meanwhile, back at the Tree of Greats, Newton is telling everyone about how he was nearly jumped by a second returner while carrying out an extermination. Newman asks if he can give her any details on what the returner's power was or what it could do, but Newton doesn't really know how to explain it. The best way he can describe it is that it was like a black fog of sorts, and upon hearing that, Hato and Toya realize that it must be the same guy who interfered in their battle against Vlad. Newman and Ein seem especially disturbed when they realize who it is, and a few moments later, just as Newton is about to ask what's wrong, the man himself appears on all the screens in the base. He cheerfully greets everyone there and mentions how wonderful it is that they have gained some new friends, but he's going to have to destroy this little gathering. Their motto is that those with talent are obligated to use it for the benefit of the world, and those who don't agree with that rule must be eliminated. But the king thinks that's an idiotic rule, because talent should be a thing of freedom that you can use any way you wish, which is why he is going to get rid of them, so he can move forward with his plan. After that, the king disappears, and Newton is left really confused because he doesn't understand what just happened. He asks Newman who that guy was, but she's too preoccupied to answer him because what just happened proves that the king really is the mastermind behind all the evil returner activity that's been going on lately. Ein is particularly upset because she can't believe the king managed to survive, but there's no denying it now. Newman explains to everyone that the returner they just met was the Tyrant King, Xiang Yu, and he possesses the strongest combat-oriented talent ever. In addition to that, he is also one of the founding members of the Forest of Greats. The others were never told this before now, but the Forest of Greats wasn't always as large as it is now. It used to only consist of 5 members, including Xiang Yu, and they had a leader who believed that talents should be used for the betterment of the world, which is why the mission of the Forest of Greats became centered around helping humanity. However, Xiang Yu was a king who thrived on tyranny, and he couldn't stand the boredom of helping people, so he betrayed the group and killed their leader. It was this act of betrayal that led Noman to believe that it is impossible to coexist with returners who possess evil talents since they inherently crave destruction. Therefore, they must be destroyed for the sake of humanity. Ein is boiling with rage because she thought she had killed Xiang Yu last time, and she swears she will finish him off for good the next time she sees him. But Newton tells her to calm down because that's a terrible idea. However, Ayn isn't in the mood to be calmed down, so she punches him across the face and tells him to shut up because he could never understand her. Newton really hates the fact that Ayn goes straight to punching when she's mad, but he tells her that he's not saying she should simply let Shang Yu go, he just means she shouldn't go in alone, because they've got a team of powerful returners who are all willing to help her. Newman also says she thinks they can win as long as they all work together, so they will hold an all-out battle to take Shang Yu out and hopefully wipe out the evil returners once and for all. They are set to head out soon, but before they leave, Newman calls Funisaka over and gives him a secret message. A week later, Newman manages to track down Xiang Yu's base, and the entire team is prepared to launch a surprise attack. Just then, the Julius Caesar returner comes running up to Haito, and he seems really attached to her, but Haito wants nothing to do with him, so she keeps dodging his advances. Caesar continues trying to get her attention. However, while he's still mid-pickup line, Haito is suddenly attacked, so she draws her swords and ends up in a stalemate with the swordsman Jubei. Jubei and Haito are actually really good friends, so this little duel is just a way of catching up and testing their skills against each other to make sure they haven't gotten rusty. Jubei then goes over to Toya to introduce herself to him, and Caesar does the same. But Toya really isn't interested in him at all, so he turns away to talk to Newman and Newton. He asks them why there are so many unfamiliar faces there, so Newton explains that the Forest of Greats has many members all over the world, but since this is such a big battle, Newman called them all back to participate. Toya is amazed because he never thought he would see so many historical talents in one place, but it seems like the members who were called back don't really want to be here. People like Charles Darwin think the evil returners are doomed to face destruction by their nature, so it would have been better to just take them out individually rather than have an all-out battle, and Bobby Fischer agrees, along with Schrödinger. Toya doesn't know much about these people, but he can tell that they don't seem like the kind of people who work well together as a team. However, that works out perfectly for him because he doesn't care about winning or losing. All he wants is to steal as many talents as possible amidst the chaos. Once everyone has settled down, Newman informs them all of the plan, and basically, they all have to attack along 3 predetermined paths. So Toya is trying to decide which route he should pick to maximize his talent hunt. But just then, Funisaka announces that he would like to pair up with Toya and Faber to head down the Earth path, and that throws a serious wrench in Toya's plan because he can't steal any skills without getting caught if he has teammates nearby. He asked Funisaka why he wants to pair up with someone like him of all people, and Funisaka simply says he has taken an interest in Toya recently, and Toya can't think of anything to say to weasel his way out of this without seeming suspicious. As the mission is about to start, they all gather by the front gate, and Neiman warns everyone to be careful because they are going to be facing some of the strongest villains in all of history. Haito and Jubei are chosen to step up and lead the charge, and as Haito passes Toya, who is clearly still panicking over getting paired, she tells him she will be much stronger by the time he reaches the castle doors, that he will have no choice but to try to steal from her. After that, Jubei and Haito break down the front gate and charge in, so it's time for the rest of the team to join the action as well. The Wright sisters both fly into the air and carry one of Newman's satellites so she can begin running her calculations, and while she's doing that, the teams make their way into the compound. As Toya is running with Funisaka, Funisaka can tell that he seems upset about something, so he assumes that Toya must be worried about Haito. After all, those two seem pretty close, so it's natural to assume that they are a couple. Toya is caught off guard a bit by what Funisaka just said, but he clarifies that there's nothing special going on between him and Haito. However, on that note, he has been wondering if there's something going on between Funisaka and Nightingale, because things get really inappropriate whenever the two of them are together. But before Funisaka can even answer, Toya realizes that he made a fatal mistake, so he quickly takes back his question. So far, he has been taking extra special care not to get involved with the personal lives of any of the members of the Forest of Greats because he wouldn't want to get attached to them and hesitate when the time comes to steal their talent. But he nearly slipped up just now. A moment later, a giant hand reaches out of the forest and attempts to grab Toya, but Funisaka pulls him away to safety in time. However, while they might be safe for now, they are still going to have to fight that group, and the Strangler looks like he's going to be problematic to deal with. The other returners also seem to be facing similar challenges, but Newman isn't really worried because she's sure they can all handle it. Schrödinger is up against the Wild Bill returner, a sharpshooter from the Wild West, and he is easily able to shoot Schrödinger in the head to finish him off. However, a moment later, Schrödinger appears right behind him, and Bill doesn't understand what's going on because he's sure he shot Schrödinger a moment ago. Schrödinger confirms it as well, but by the nature of his ability, even though he was shot in the head, there was an alternate universe where he wasn't, so he simply shifted into that one instead. His power allows him to manipulate the probability of any outcome. For example, even though he's not particularly good at aiming with a gun, he can choose a reality where he manages to land a perfect headshot by pure luck, and when he does that, he can essentially never miss. As for Darwin, he is up against the Red Ripper, a returner whose claws can slice through anything. But the Ripper isn't the only one who possesses claws, because Darwin's ability allows him to evolve any traits or features necessary to win a fight, so beating the Ripper won't be a challenge for him. And likewise, Bobby Fischer and the others aren't struggling either, but Haito is starting to get annoyed because Jubei keeps stealing all the strong opponents before she gets a chance to fight. However, Toya and Funaseka aren't having it as easy as the rest of them because the Strangler is too tough for them to beat on their own. Just then, Funasaka tells Toya to keep moving and leave him behind, which surprises Toya quite a bit, but Funasaka says that all that matters is that they win the battle overall. He then takes out his gun and begins firing at the henchman before chucking a grenade at the Strangler. But the grenade doesn't do much as the Strangler tanks the blast and goes straight for Funasaka. However, at the last second, Toya jumps in to save him, and he's about to activate his ability, but just then the Strangler drops dead on the spot. Toya doesn't understand what just happened, so Funasaka explains that this was the work of Faber, the returner with the talent of stealth, and since he is able to block all perception of his movements, he was able to inject the Strangler with a deadly dose of poison to kill him. The second Toya hears that, he starts thinking to himself how great it would be if he could steal that talent for himself, but he'd have to figure out a way to catch an invisible talent holder off guard. At the same time, Funasaka calls Newman and asks her if she's sure she wants him to keep an eye on Toya, because Toya seems pretty trustworthy to him so far. But she has been suspicious of him for a while now because he seems overly interested in the talents of others, and he has been switching his phone off a lot to hide from her surveillance, so she thinks he might be working for Shang Yu. Meanwhile, in the clock tower, one of Shang Yu's subordinates, a sniper, is posted up and preparing to take out the Wright brothers to bring down Newman's satellite. But Noman had already thought ahead and posted a sniper of her own at a different location to take out Shang Yu's sniper. However, she didn't account for the fact that Shang Yu had already prepared a second sniper at a different location, so the twins get headshotted. And Noman looks on in horror as two of her companions meet a gruesome end. And the situation is only getting started because Shang Yu still has his 5 generals lying in wait to annihilate the Forest of Greats. Meanwhile, on Toya's end, Funasaka realizes that he has just lost contact with Noman, and while he is distracted, 2 attackers try to take him down. However, Toya steps in and uses Vlad's power to stop them, but Funasaka recognizes the power as one of the evil returner's abilities, and that makes him suspect that Toya really is a spy. This was the end of episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next part.